Now let's go over the three concepts of pelvic tilts, articulated bridging, and neutral bridging, otherwise known as a glute bridge. All three of these really do work well together, especially having the pelvic tilt because it is the precursor to being able to do an articulated bridge. Let's come down to the mat and work through it. So you're down on your back here, nice long spine, just neutral legs, so they're just about hips width apart, and your feet are sliding back towards your bum. Now let's make a triangle with our hand, taking the heel of the hand and bringing it to the hip bones here, the as is, and then the fingertips will drape down towards the pubic bone. All right, hold here and just notice where your pubic bone is and your hip bones are. Is your pubic bone higher than your hip bones, putting you into a posterior tilt of the pelvis? Or are your hip bones higher than your pubic bone, dropping you into an anterior tilt in the pelvis? So ideally for a neutral pelvis, we're looking to have the pubic bone and the hip bones be in a nice level plane together. So imagining you had a wine bottle or a champagne bottle is sitting on your pelvis right here. It's not falling between your legs or dumping onto your chest. It should be able to sit up nice and level between that triangle here in a nice level plane. Another way to think about it is if you had a marble on your pubic bone and you wanted it to roll into your belly button, you're tilting the pelvis, letting the marble roll down, putting you into that posterior tilt, imprinting the spine on the floor. Or vice versa, you're rolling that marble to the pubic bone, maybe it's dropping between the legs, then you're going into that anterior tilt of the pelvis. So work to pull that marble back into the center of your triangle. Now you're nice and level. One last way to think about this pelvic tilt is thinking about the pelvic bowl. So if you're dumping water out the front of your bowl, you're going to anterior tilts, pubic bones lower than the hip bones. Or vice versa, you're going into a posterior tilt and the water is dumping out the backside. Pubic bones higher and the hip bones are pulling into the body. So level that back out and let's think about the engagement that's involved in doing this pelvic tilt. So your pelvic floor is the first part of this magic carpet ride. You're thinking about all the musculature down there. It kind of feels like you're stopping wind from coming out, for women stopping a tampon from coming out, as well as stopping urine from coming out the urethra. So once you engage all of those muscles, the pelvic floor pulls in and automatically you start to feel the lower abdominal region contract. Your transverse abdominis, that deep layer, starts to pull in and cinch in the waist. So that's exactly what you want to happen to start, right? And then the rectus abdominis is going to kick in. It's going to make that marble roll into the belly button, and you're going to find the distance between the hips and the ribs gets shorter. All right, and you're coming right back into that neutral place. So find your triangle again if you lost it. Find your neutral place. Take a nice inhale, letting everything relax. And on the exhale, you're thinking about the pelvic floor, urethra, vagina, anus, low belly pulls in, rectus abdominis contracts, the pelvis tilts, and that marble rolls into the belly button. Or you're dumping the water out the backside. Inhale, coming back towards that neutral space, nice level playing field, so your champagne bottle is sitting up nice and tall. Exhale, pelvic floor, low belly, rectus abdominis engage, pelvis tilts. Inhale back into that neutral space. Let's do that one more time. Exhale, pelvic floor, low belly. Imprint the spine, rectus abdominis is engaging. Then inhale back to neutral, holding it here. So that is a precursor for us going into a bridge. But one more way to think about your pelvic tilt, you're going to take your thumb and your pointer fingers. Take the thumb to the base of the bottom ribs, and then take the pointer fingers to the as-is here in the front. Notice the distance in your neutral spine, your neutral pelvis position. On your exhale, you have the pelvic floor, low belly, rectus abdominis, ribs and hips get closer. The distance gets shorter here. Fingers get closer together. All right, that's that posterior tilt. And then inhale back to neutral. The distance lengthens out. Exhale, pelvic floor, low belly, rectus abdominis, and the distance gets shorter. And inhale back to neutral. Hold it there. Now, noticing that distance between the ribs and the hip, keep it the same. Now, we're ready to go into our bridge. So, going through your pelvic tilt. Exhale, pelvic floor, low belly, rectus abdominis, distance gets shorter between the fingers. Hold it here. Now, start to lift up your spine off the mat. You're going to find the distance gets the nice neutral length again once you get into your bridge. You have this length in the front of the hip, and being mindful not to go too high because then the distance of the fingers is going to get even wider. So keep that neutral space. Exhale, sink in the chest. Feel the distance gets shorter between the ribs and the hips. Start to come down, upper back, mid back. Hollow out that tummy so you can get through the low back. And this is where that distance gets super short, all the way back into that neutral place. Inhaling. Exhale, pelvic floor, low belly, transverse, rectus abdominis. Distance gets shorter, comes back up into that neutral space. Sinking the chest, bringing the ribs down, letting that distance get shorter, hollow out the tummy, super short distance, lots of engagement in the transverse and the rectus, all the way back into that neutral length. Now hold your neutral length so we can go for our glute bridge or our hip lift here, and pushing into your feet, engaging the back of the legs, those hamstrings really turning on. Push into the ball of the feet and the heels. Lift the hips up, keeping the distance right here the same. Exhale, start to come down. Ribs and hips are tapping the ground around the same time. Hips and ribs are lifting up around the same time. Distance does not change here between the fingers. And up and lift, push into the feet, ball of the foot and heel. And coming down. You want to feel that push definitely on the big toe side. That's where we generate the most force in our foot here. And noticing if they're rolling out to the pinky toes. Push, lift, and hold right here, keeping that neutral distance. So there's a few places that the distance might not be in neutral. So if you notice this client is sagging and dropping the hips, you're going to find the distance gets longer here. As well as the hips too high, the distance gets longer. So find that neutral place. Notice on the way down, if the ribs start to sink, then that means they're articulating the ribs and the upper spine. So keep the distance the same. Let everything come down at once. It's nice one unit. Just imagining you have a stick down your spine and you can't move. It's kind of like Barbie dolls or action figures, except for the made-to-move ones now for the Barbie dolls. But they don't have a spine. So everything goes up and down together. I hope this was helpful. Teaching your clients self-palpation techniques is wonderful because you can work with a large group of people and still teach the concepts of how to get them into a pelvic tilt, how to have them do an articulated bridge, as well as doing a neutral bridge or a hip bridge, glute bridge to lift up. This will be wonderful to help them move forward in so many Pilates exercises and being able to grasp the concepts of how to stabilize and mobilize their spine and pelvis.